So we are moving over to the next panel. Again, talking about sustainability. Now we're coming to the core of that, environmental sustainability. Aspects of that sort, topic being beyond net zero, Eco-Visionaries, and the carbon negative journey. So I'm here accompanied by Peter Rose, president of HYDRO-QUEBEC, and Anthony Boccardi, the president of Powell Vodka, who, for all the people that are lucky enough to be here later, there will be available for us to taste a little bit of the Opal vodka. So very interesting. So not the most intuitive match, right? So we're talking about hydro energy and liquor. So, but that is a great match in my perspective. And so I would love to kick this off and help people to understand really when we are starting, maybe we're starting here with Anthony, also talking about why should a brand, a liquor brand, focus on environmental sustainability?
First and foremost, thank you for having me. And for a coincidence, we actually use his hydropower to produce our vodka. So by coincidence, we actually made in heaven. So how a brand, in a liquor brand with sustainability, is one of our key ingredients. Like when you're producing a spirit, water is a very key source. And our water is one of the purest light waters found on the planet. Due to the fact that there's no pollution, no population, how nature intended it to be. If we don't do certain aspects or we don't do certain things day to day, that quality will decrease, leaving our product to change year over year. So sustainability, in a sense, is sustainable. How can we produce this product year over year by keeping it the same for the next 100 years? So the little things that we do, we want to make sure that we could be sustainable for this bound of time. And if you look at our sustainability, we have two real aspects: what we could control and what we can't control. So everyone here has a carbon footprint. We got here by a plane, by a car, we've done something. These are the things that we cannot control. But there's things that we could control, which is our packaging. So we push our suppliers to be as sustainable as possible by recyclability, by repurposed upscaled fruit that we use for our seltzers. Anything that we could do, we do with a purpose. And then if we look at what we cannot control based on, let's say, transportation, distribution, bring it to liquor stores, we try to offset our carbon footprint by reforesting where we get the water to kind of keep it clean.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A great introduction. And Pete, on that footnote, obviously, creating the water is done by the planet. The usage of it in the right way is very important for not only the product, but also here the energy creation. Could you, just to pick up everybody and bring everybody on the same page, quickly talk about sustainability versus finite resources, or sustainable resources versus finite?
Sure. No, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the promotion. I'm now president of HYDRO-QUEBEC.
That's what I have on my little card.
That's fine. Maybe you have a crystal ball.
Senior director.
There you go.
My bad. Here you go. You're the president. He's the senior director.
There you go. But I'll take it.
Please.
Let
them know I said it.
It's a really good question. So I work for HYDRO-QUEBEC. It's the largest renewable energy producer in North America. And what does it mean to be renewable? It's a source that you will get back and renew. So think about solar, think about wind. We produce our electricity from water. And if you want to take the journey of water, the water will start as rain. The rain will fall into the river. The river will come into the hydro facility we have 62 of them that we have, will generate electricity from that drop of water. That water will return back to the river. Then it will evaporate into the atmosphere, and then it will rain and come back. So when you talk about a natural, renewable source of energy, that's what hydroelectricity is.
As opposed to the finite resources.
So so you have finite resources. That's what we use here in New York City. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm from New York City. Have the great privilege to work for HYDRO-QUEBEC. We power our lives, and to do anything here, to have the fashion show, to be at Mastercard, to have gotten here, to do all the processes, we need power, right? And we power our economy and our lives here in New York City principally through the burning of something. So over 90% of the power that we consume in New York City comes from burning. That was the way the system was set up, but we're changing that now. So when you talk about finite source, you have a finite amount of coal, you have a finite amount of oil, you have a finite amount of natural gas. The renewables, the solar, the wind, and the hydro, they are renewable in the process that I described.
Just takes a little bit of a couple of million years to reproduce that little coal that we have here available on this planet. So on that note, you are bringing that energy now to New York City, right? Back to your hometown, that's what you're working on. Tell us a little bit more about that process.
No, I appreciate it. It's been a labor of love, almost 15 years in the making. So, and I'll try to be as quick as possible with this, but it is really interesting how it happens, right? So you have to have alignment. We talked about this before, where the politicos, stakeholders, businesses, communities want to have change. And so that change happened in about 2019 and 2020 when laws were created for that. So there's laws at the state level for a certain amount of clean energy that has to come into our system. There's laws at the city level where buildings need to start capping their emissions. So we're transitioning towards a clean economy, moving from the fossil economy that we were talking about, 90 plus, to eventually 100% zero carbon. And so as New York looked, and New York City looked for, how do we get continuously available, because hydro is water, always flows, always turning the turbines, how do we get this base load or first chunk of a major amount of power to New York City? You need transmission. It's not the sexiest, coolest thing to talk about, but you have your energy source somewhere. In this case, in Quebec, hundreds of miles away, the consumers are here. It has to take a highway. And the highway, the form of that is called a transmission line. And so we're building it's actually 390 miles to get to the border and to the Quebec system. 62 generating stations will provide enough power for over 1 million homes or displace 20 to 25% of the fossil that we're currently distributing.
Amazing, and we'll get into in a second to a little bit more details why this is good for the consumer, besides the obvious. Anthony, on your side, as being a benefactor of the resource water here, producing a very clean product, a great product, what is it that you would recommend or give advice to other producers? Why is sustainability an important factor for you as a company as it relates to the consumer, as it always, most of the time, increases also the production cost? Why would you encourage other producers to go the sustainable way?
Well, what we're seeing right now in a lot of products, sometimes quality costs will affect the quality. We don't, at the Opal company, we try not to cut any corners. Key attributes, which are our key ingredients, are our main resources. So by keeping everything sustainable, of course, the cost is a bit higher, especially if we want to offset our carbon footprint by reforesting where we get the water. It does add a cost, but the product speaks for itself. And as long as we keep that product clean, that water source that we're talking about, this the product continues to stay as top quality. What we're looking at with HYDRO-QUEBEC is these water sources where Pete, right? What he was explaining is that these water sources are fantastic. Where we get the water source is probably in the northern part of Quebec, where we find hydro. It's a 25,000-year-old Mother Nature filtration system, which is pretty much one of the world's finest light waters you could find. And that's due to nature as intended. No pollution, no population.
Rebuilt this.
So that's what we try to do. So by us keeping this sustainability, by keeping clean, by all the little things that we could do, if all the big players would do the same thing, you would see a lot of waste, a lot of rejection, rejected products upcycle.
How do you communicate this to the consumer?
We try it with social media. We have little messages. These little panels do help to get our message across. We have ambassadors. We do tastings across the country. We're growing around we're in 9 countries, soon to be 14. Yep. We have little ambassadors. We try to tell a story, but there's a lot of noise. But more and more, when people try the product, they ask, why does it taste a certain way that it tastes? And we can explain that we have only 2 ingredients inside, 2 key attributes.
I think there's a recurring theme in this whole, and all the entire panel series here is education, right? So it's really coming down to educating the consumers, not only on the benefits of the product itself, but on the benefits of why sustainability is sustainable, and it really helps them long term. So on your side, I shared the story with you. I just came back from the gym yesterday, and there was this lady standing there with a little booth and had me to sign up for wind energy. But how does the process actually work in a city like New York City? How much influence does the consumer have? And what can consumers do to change companies like Con Ed's corporate policies, for example?
That's a great and very complex
question. A quick answer, quick, one sentence.
But let's go back to the basics. Our infrastructure, right? People here know how the metro, subway works. The electricity grid down here comes into New York City. It's an electricity grid that goes through the entire state of New York that's extremely congested. All right, so why do we not get power from hydro facilities up in the northern part of New York, or wind, or solar, that electron that we're consuming down here just physically can't get down here due to all of this congestion. So the woman that you met, the wind, you can, as a consumer, go to Con Edison. Con Edison's your distributor. So we deregulated the system here in the United States. At some point, it was all vertically integrated. They decided, no, if you produce, you produce. If you transmit, you transmit. If you distribute, you distribute. Con Edison's a distributor. So when you look at your Con Edison bill, they're buying power through the bulk system of the New York ISO, or the Independent Systems Operator. And then they're delivering it to you. So you'll look at your bill and you'll see the different charges, right? You can, if you're a savvy consumer, you default to Con Edison. Con Edison buys the power that's on the big, huge system in New York, or you can select your service provider, energy service provider, right? But knowing you're doing that is not, and it's a wonderful thing because you're incentivizing clean energy. You're buying renewable energy credits produced somewhere that you probably are not going to consume yourself. But if you're thinking sustainably and fighting climate change, it's good to know that you're contributing to incentivizing more clean energy. But if you really want to say, I am consuming and living and powering my life with renewable energy, you need to get it to the city. So the project I'm on is actually a dedicated transmission line from point A to point B going into the city. There's offshore wind that's being built right now, and there's solar in the vicinity that will also have dedicated transmission lines to come in to the city. So maybe it might sound a little convoluted. I would encourage people, if they're real climate crusaders, find out a way, go to your current energy provider. But if you really want to make a difference, keep promoting the delivery of clean energy into New York City. Talk to your elected officials, understand what the system is and how it works. And frankly, demand that we need to make the transition if you believe that we need to fight climate change.
Comes down to the ballot box, right? I like to say that nothing in life can affect your daily life more than politics. And so, it's not only the presidential election, register to vote in your districts and then make an impact by voting the right way, right? And make an impact locally. So when you are producing sustainably and you see other, let's say competitors, but maybe even in other branches there, from your journey, what would you recommend? Where should people start? Not everybody has access to clean water in that regard, how you do. But where are things that people can start with, like simple things to change?
So one of the things that we implement in our company, even what everyone could do, is we push our suppliers more and more. So a lot of the times they always want to have, let's say for glass, for example, we're using 40 to 50% recycled glass. We could push our suppliers to get more cullet, more recyclability. Organic decoration is a huge thing. Transportation could go to EV instead of gas. These are things where the bigger the company gets, the more buying power and the more you could push back on the suppliers. Suppliers are the hardest thing to maneuver. If let's say you're doing like POS, like marketing material, you're making, let's say, buckets, bar mats, all of these things have an impact as well. Yep. So if you could push them by making, let's say, recycled plastic, recycled rubber, these are ways that you could actually push on any type of aspect in the business.
Interesting. So really having the impact on the consumer in the end, where they go to in the bar, and really changing that. Is like the supply or the delivery chain where you get your product from A to B. Mm-hmm. Would you say, is that one of the main concerns still?
That would definitely be if you look at anything coming from overseas, they have a few ocean liners that's very hard to change. And that's when I was explaining at the beginning, we have two aspects. We have what we could control and what we can't control. The ones, let's say, from these big ocean liners, these big transport companies, it's very hard to move a massive ship. So that's where we could kind of offset what we're doing with reforesting in the Great North to kind of make us potentially carbon neutral by 2024.
Amazing. Pete, on the impact of the consumer here directly, like individuals. So can you point to some aspects what makes your life better if more resources are being used from a sustainable source rather than coal, for example? I mean, besides the obvious like pollution maybe in the sky, but maybe even if it's that, what would you say to a consumer why they should focus on sustainable energy?
It's interesting. The one that you mentioned was the most convincing when we were talking to populations here. Because we have a lot of fossil generation in New York City. Where is it located? It's located in underserved frontline communities that have borne the brunt of living next to fired generation. So they're actually breathing in the localized air pollutants that shows statistically higher rates of asthma, coronary disease. And that translates into your life to, if you're missing school, you can't get to work, and it keeps you down. You don't break that cycle, right? And so the first benefit for me is health. And you can quantify this. If anybody wants to talk to me about it, I can tell you numbers. So first, you talk about health. You talk about the volatility of the fossil fuel prices. So again, we don't set the price in this country, contrary to what people might think. These are global prices for oil and for gas. So if it spikes, if there's something that happens overseas, if there's anything that affects the market, the price of natural gas goes up. That's what we use to power this city. You'll see that reflected in your bill. So if you get sustainable, renewable energy on contracts, so we have a 25-year contract with the state of New York at a fixed price, all of a sudden you have predictability. Businesses know what it's going to cost. It's not volatile. It doesn't go up and down. The more clean energy you get on a system, it's just economics. The more volume, the more it depresses the costs. So when you look out on a longer term, it's not tomorrow. Clean energy transition, like any transition in life, is not going to be cheap. You're going to pay now to benefit later. And I think we have to get in that mentality. We all do. Me included, everybody. We live for now. But no, we live for our kids, hopefully the next generation. Got to think about our planet. There's all these. So there's so many benefits from moving over to renewable energy. Happy to talk more later.
And I could actually jump in on that because our facility where we produce the vodka is powered by hydro, and it's always consistent, and it's been great so far. So
it's interesting. I mean, we talked about this in our green room conversation. It's which I didn't know. I mean, this the Biden administration is now one of the highest producing administrations. We are independent, so to speak, of energy or independent energy production, independent from other sources. On paper, so to speak, you alluded and clarified also that's not really true because we're exporting the oil, the coal, everything that we're producing, the gas, into other countries because our facilities are only designed to properly work with the oil that comes from the crude oil that comes from Saudi Arabia, for example. Can you elaborate on this a little?
Sure, I could do that. And definitely it's the same on electricity. The more interconnected you are, the stronger you are. And we have, just an example here in the United States, some of you might remember, last winter, it was a winter ago, I kind of lose track, I have a young kid, so I don't sleep much. But Texas, all of a sudden you saw Texas on the news.
Yeah.
People without power forever. Texas made a conscious decision not to connect their grid to their neighbors. New York is connected to the Quebec grid. They're connected to the New England grid. So the more connected you are, the more resilience you have in your system. And so you are going to be dependent, but you're dependent on your neighbor at certain times for certain reasons. And so together, might sound cheesy, together you are stronger. So this idea of being energy independent is really somewhat marketing, let's put it that way.
On the product side again, we have seen a big push specifically in the wine regions to produce more sustainably, to source the grapes more sustainably. In the vodka field, do you see a trend in the consumer's behavior to also pivoting towards more sustainable brands? Or how do you see that market currently, and where is still work to be done?
The number one thing is I feel education on a product. The big brands, they do have a lot of budget. They have a lot of history behind it. They've been there for X amount of years. So I think educating the client a lot, the consumer, is something. The fact that there's no additives, the clean, all of these things, I feel education is one of the biggest things of that question. That's the best way I could explain it to you.
Is it in your field also, I mean, we've seen like the, don't want to use any brand names, but like, George Clooney promoting something. And is that a way of communication that helps most, that works best, like using celebrities, influencers of sort?
Any channel of marketing, I think, is great. It depends on what a celebrity or the endorser stands for, because of course they could say one thing but do another. So it's very hard to actually see what their actual core values are. But they have a larger reach. They have a good channel. A lot of people follow them. That's why they're influential, because they influence these people. But in retrospect, I think the consumer has to want to be they want to have that forefront, like we were talking about changing power, or if they want to address more sustainability, they care about the brand behind. And we're seeing that more and more with the younger generation, where they care about what the brand stands for, what the brand represents. And we have this core value that if you look at all of our documentation, we actually do what we say we're doing.
Yeah.
So as long as a consumer cares about these things, it's very good. And by all means, the product does speak for itself. It's very good.
It's good.
Please, at 4 o'clock, we do have the event from 4 to 8. Please try it. We have the vodka, the seltzers, and I could explain everything you guys are drinking.
Amazing. And so, I mean, you're echoing basically what Michelle said earlier also, that there's a shift in consumer behavior. Also, people want to know more about the product and support sustainable products. So is there, from your perspective as a product producer, what is the biggest challenge, besides marketing and education, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to sustainability? And maybe it's regulation, so that's where I'm hinting towards. Is there something that you can give away also to the audience here to say like, hey, this is something you need to take a look at very early in the process because it will just slow you down? Maybe not, but anything that you can share.
First thing is where you get anything manufactured, from its bottling, marketing, because a component of a bottle has a lot of things. You have the actual glass. Just to begin with, you could actually have lead in your glass, which is very poisonous. So we always look at for like lead-free glass, how recycled has it been, paper's been recycled. If you have something on a cap, is the cap recyclable? So the cap, just the bottle itself has a lot of components. So any type of decoration, if it's not organic decoration, the bottle itself is not even recyclable. So you have to be very careful on what the actual packaging is. What does the brand represent? What are they doing? Their events, their marketing material, where is it being placed, or how are they purchasing it? And then even the product itself. We've seen products where they could add a certain chemical inside that's not only hazardous for the human body, but also hazardous for when they do waste. So all these little things increase on the size of the business as well.
Is there an labeling requirement right now is there a labeling solution right now that actually informs the consumer of what this bottle was produced in a lead-free way?
You could always claim anything on your bottle. There's a way you could put on the label like lead-free glass and all these things. You could communicate it on your channels, but most of the people won't really do it. It's not really eye-consuming. So say like
there's nothing out there. It says like boom.
There you have your ingredient list.
Yeah.
So these are things where if a consumer wants to read, they could see everything they want to see. But pretty much it's eye-catching what they hear. It's a bit more hard. There's a lot of noise, especially in the spirit space. So to get your message across, and there's so many players around, so you're going up against a grain with a lot of competitors and a lot of noise. So it's a bit an uphill battle, we'll say.
I can see. I think I definitely can see like a labeling function. I mean, specifically with lead is a problem in the glass that consumers should know about. I want both of you also to think about, again, what you like the audience to take away here, but I want to open this up also for questions if you have some. If you want to ask something about the HYDRO-QUEBEC or anything about the product creation, if you're here, like please raise your hand. Happy to open up this panel to any questions that are around. Adam?
Thank you. So this is for Pete. So as you mentioned, generation isn't really the problem. You have curtailment in like CAISO and other areas. And so one of the people we work with, one of our employees, is on the advisory board for ERCOT, and transmission is such an issue. We deal with this all the time. So I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, how do you get past to build more transmission? Because the incentive isn't always there for the generators to build it, right? Your job is generation, and without transmission distribution, as you said, you can't get the electrons from point A to point B. How do you guys look at that issue, and how do you push, whether it's political will or going on your own and trying to push other people to design and build? What do you do for that?
It's an excellent question, and I would be CEO if I had the answer. I don't have it. But what we do,
two more panels.
What we do know we need as an industry is, to your point, more transmission. But at the end of the day, who pays for it, right? And we don't have a national system here. We are a wonderful 50 states, and some states say, well, the generation is in my state, that's great. The other state says that I actually going to consume it. And then the states that pass through for the transmission say, why should I be funding transmission if I'm not seeing a benefit? They are, but it becomes a very quick, and they don't have a solution yet. There's lots of different approaches. There's bills right now going through Congress that they're trying to figure this out. There's pushes at every different, if the federal government can't figure it out, regions are figuring it out. So New England, for example, just gave themselves, through the NESCO, authority to do long-term planning for transmission, and also to actually go out and do an RFP and produce. So I think we're getting there. It comes down to how do you pay for it? And I wish I had a better answer to you. It just takes a lot of time and political will. And so it goes back to the politics. Are we all aligned to make this transition? It's a huge pizza pie. If you start thinking about money, everybody's going to make money. But the instinct is to pull back. If I'm losing market share, I don't want this, I'm going to block it. It goes back to the information campaign. We have to be really conscious, you asked that question, conscious of the information that we consume, and might sound ridiculous, check the source. Check the source, because we live in a world, Twitter, Facebook, X now, Facebook, and you read it, and you say, oh, that's gospel, that's scripture, that's true, that's real. But you really have to check the source. So it goes back to people, to your point, getting informed. Getting informed is difficult when you have a million things being thrown at you at one time and you start to rank your priorities. For most people, they just want to know they can plug in, charge their iPhone, charge whatever. They're not really thinking about how am I getting the power? What's the impact of the power? How can I get more transmission? So again, it's not sexy. If somebody's a good marketer here, we can work on trying to get that, that information campaign out there.
Yeah, it's the issue between the disconnect between some action and the reaction, because oftentimes disconnected, right? So it's like you're consuming energy on this side, but then the impact is being felt on the communities you said are next to the coal plant, right? So interesting, yeah. Any additional question? I have one more here on that side, on the product side. If you are talking to, or if you're seeing other brands that are not sustainable, is there something you would like legislation-wise to change where this is kind of like an unfair advantage, what I'm getting at? I would just I wonder, it really triggers me when we're talking about politics and so forth. So is there something you would love to see change?
There's a lot of things that I'd love to see.
The first that comes to mind.
It would give our company a forefront in a lot of aspects and a lot of channels. The thing is, our process is somewhat very unique. We also have an international patent pending on our process. Legality, if we would have these stages for, let's say, our seltzer or our vodka, it would eliminate probably 90% of what's on the market right now. So that would put us in the forefront. So it's just something where if legality changes on no additives or no chemicals or certain what your emission is, and they would cut all these boundaries, we would be at the forefront of a lot of things. So that would be brilliant and would be very helpful, but I don't really want to say anything a bit more than that.
Got it. On the outlook for the future here, what do you think the next 10 years will look like here in an environment like New York City? Are we on the right path, a mediocre path, or the wrong path? Is it going in the right direction?
I appreciate that question. I look tired because I literally was on a 5:30 a.m. flight from Syracuse. So Governor Hochul convened industry leaders, both in our industry, but also government leaders from DC, to come to Syracuse to talk about the future energy economy. So are we doing it fast enough? And are we going to be able to do economic development if we're going to do this clean energy transition? I think the answer to your question is directionally, we're going in the right direction. But like anything, change is hard. And things that you can, your point, control, not control. Did people foresee when they started to develop offshore wind projects here, that they think that there was going to be a war in the Ukraine and that supply chains would be disrupted and then inflation would hit and prices would go through the roof? Those types of things slow down infrastructure projects, not because the people constructing don't want to do it, not because the politicians don't want to do it, but then real life comes in. So to your question, we're going in the right direction. We got some catch up, and this was for advanced technologies too. So the governments are always keeping their eye on what's that next technology. Are we going to have fission that we can really use? So you could always think ahead on technologies, how they can advance. But in the next 10 years, this project coming in May 2026 will be the first delivery of renewable energy to New York City. So 1 out of 5 light bulbs, or you look at the skyline, you can remember, I remember that guy Pete Rose from HYDRO-QUEBEC. That's coming from Quebec. We're going to have some offshore wind projects come in. And all this is good for the economy because it means jobs too. I didn't get to that point as another benefit, but you have economic impacts that are wonderful. So to your point, are we on trajectory to meet our goals as we set out years ago? No, but does that mean that we stop? Definitely not. We got to go faster.
Very good. Anthony, last words, where can people find you? And what would you like the audience to take away from, if they remember one thing from today?
Our slogan is distilled differently, and we do everything with a passion. 2 key ingredients. You can find us on our website, opalvodka.com. Instagram, social media. We do sell online to all states, and every single state with a current distributor is its own country in a sense. So we are opening up the state of New York relatively soon.
Very nice. Pete, the same question. What would you like people to take away from today's talk, and where can they find out more about HYDRO-QUEBEC?
Sure. I would say go to the Champlain Hudson Power Express or chpe.com to learn about this big project, right? And from there, you'll get all the information. And as I do when I speak with most people, inform yourself. Like, walk away from here, hopefully you're curious. Dig into it a little bit. You got questions, now you have resources that you can reach out to. And be active in your community. If you care about this transition, if you care about fighting climate change, if you care about everything we talked about here, get involved. This is what's beautiful about this city. We're 8 million people, very diverse, full of passion. We can really move mountains when we want to.
Wonderful, very inspiring. Thank you very much. Put your hands together here.
Thank you.
And thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.